Okay, so here's where we left off. We included a totals row and an average row. And what I was showing you as we ended up is that as we use the fill handle to kind of drag these functions across, it was actually changing the function slightly to move over and make sure that it's loading a different column. Okay, so it knows to like change the letters so that this area gets changed as as you drag across. Okay, I'm double clicking in each of these cells. When I double click in each of these cells, it gives me a visual example of the where the function is acting on, where the arguments are. And it's also showing me what the function is that's behind the numbers. Now, another thing to point out right here is that this is another example of where what is displayed in the cell is different than what is actually in the cell, okay? What I see displayed here are numbers, of course. But that's not actually what's in the cell. If I look up here in the function toolbar, here I can see what is actually in the cell. And what's actually in the cell is a function. The sum function or the average function, okay? So here I can quickly inspect and see what's going on in those cells behind the scenes, okay? We are also going to create, so those are called functions. The functions look like this. They've got an equal sign, a function name, and a parentheses with some arguments in here. You'll see that those will get a lot more advanced as we go. But if we create one category that's called functions, we're now going to create another category called formulas, okay? And you can think of formulas as what you would learn in algebra, okay? For this, I'm going to go into F5 under mortality rate. And here I'm going to create just a very simple algebraic formula, okay? And what I want is to find the average of total deaths in per total cases for each state, okay? So this is just a very simple division formula. So whenever I want Excel to do math for me, that is, like I want it to actually like act as a calculator, I'm always going to begin with the equal sign. Always, always, always. I start with the equal sign, and I can do this a couple of different ways. The first thing that I can do after I type my equal sign is I can click in my first cell. So when I click, it's going to automatically fill in that cell reference. It puts in D5. I want to create a division, so I'm going to use my division symbol. It's this / here. And then I want to put in B5. Now, I could click again, but just to show you, for sake of argument, I can also just type B5. And as soon as I type B5, it knows that I'm doing a cell reference, and it highlights that cell, so I can visually see that I'm actually typing in the correct cell that I want to talk about. Okay, so this is my algebraic formula. I'm saying in this cell, I want you to display, that's the equal sign, the division between D5 divided by B5, okay? The total deaths divided by the total cases. When I'm all done with my formula, I just tap enter, and I'm going to get a number. I'm going to see up in the formula bar, I'm going to see the actual formula that I typed out, okay? What makes this a formula and not a function is that I don't have this function name. This is a function. This is a formula, okay? All right. This stretch of numbers is not very approachable. It's not very easy for my audience to read. So we're going to format that. Remember, I told you that our responsibility with spreadsheets is making sure that the numbers are actually easy to read and understand by anybody who's looking at the document. Let's back up one step real quick, and I'm just going to copy that formula down just like I did before. So we're going to bring this formula down to here. Okay, so we're looking at our state mortality rates. We don't want a total a division, and we don't want to find an average here. Okay, so we've just got these numbers. I used my fill handle to drag that down. Again, if I double click, I'm going to notice that the formula changes as I drag down to look at different numbers. Okay, so we're going to take this area right here where my mortality rate is, and we are going to make it display a percentage. So we're going to go back to our old friend. This is in the Home tab, Number Group, and I'm going to click on Percentage. Okay, so by default, the percentage is showing me, a ones place, a decimal point, and a tens and a hundreds place. Okay, and I think I'm fine with that. Note that I could change the amount of decimals using these arrow keys in the number group, but we're just going to keep it like this with 2 placeholders after the decimal point. Okay. So now I have my mortality rate for coronavirus in these 5 states. What I need you to do is create, let me do one more thing here before I hand off the baton to you guys. Formatting wise, we want to let our reader know in some way that this is a totals area and that this is a totals area, that we're using functions, that this information is describing the raw numbers that are above it. Okay, I'm not going to get too into the weeds about that, but suffice to say, we want these rows to look just a little bit different than what's happening up here. So here we go. We are going to take our 2 titles here, our 2 row headings, and we're going to apply some bolding to that. I'm also going to drag across line row 9, where I currently have Virginia, but it's the row just before my totals and average, and it's really common to have a double line bottom border that separates your data from totals or averages. It's just a common way of showing it. So I'm going to do bottom double border all the way across here. Okay. And I want to apply just a little bit of color or shading here. So I'm going to use, let's use like a matching yellow that matches my title up here. You can choose a color that you'd like. I'm also going to show that mortality rate is a little bit different. So I'm going to highlight from here down. So all of my mortality rate percentages, I'm going to highlight from F5 down to F9. I'm going to give that an alternate color. So I'm choosing a light gray. And I'm also going to put a thin border all the way around it using outside borders. Okay, so that's going to show, I don't like that. You know what, I think, here's what I do, because I don't want to change, this is nitpicky stuff, but I don't like how it goes from a thick border up here to a thin border over there. So that's where I'm not enjoying it. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a thin left border, and I'm going to do a thin right border. And there we go. I have my area is it's got borders around it. It's got a different shade to it. Okay, and I've got my totals area selected as well. Okay, so what I want you guys to do as I wrap up this video is I want you to do the same thing down here. So we're going to make this table match this table for the states and countries. Okay, so we've already created our two additional rows. You're going to put totals and average here. You're going to make sure that you put in functions for the total. You're going to make sure that you put in the functions for the average. And now be careful, because what a lot of you will miss is your average. You want to make sure that that average does not include the total. Okay, that will be found here. You want that average to only average the numbers from, let's say, B14 down to B18. We're going to make sure that we've got this area filled. You're also going to put in a mortality rate, which is going to be the exact same kind of function as this, formula as this. Okay, it's going to add the total deaths, divide the total deaths by the total cases. All right, I recommend using the fill handle to go down. And you're going to apply some light formatting to make those columns, those areas stand out. Okay, once you have that completed, you can call that Excel Activity 5 and turn that in to Google Classroom. All right, so that concludes Activity 5. Thank you guys so much for continuing to participate, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. We've got one more week before spring break. Yay! We will be respecting spring break, so over that period of time, that's let's say from the 13th to the 17th is what our spring break would be. That is going to be, there's not going to be any assignments during that period of time. Okay? All right. If you have any questions, let me know, and I will talk to you all on Monday with some new work.